The Empress of Thorns did not eat. This was not a metaphor, nor was it an exaggeration born of poetic courtiers. It was a biological fact. Empress Valisra of the Xylosian Dominion was a being of pure energy bound in a crystalline lattice, and the concept of sustenance, of chewing, swallowing, digesting, was as alien to her as photosynthesis was to a human. Yet twice per galactic standard week, she sat in the great hall of 1,000 stars at a table long enough to land a shuttle on and watched her subjects eat. It was tradition. It was politics. It was torture. The hall was a masterpiece of Xylosian architecture, a cavernous space carved from a single asteroid of living crystal. The table itself was a slab of polished obsidian, surrounded by 1,000 chairs, each one occupied by the most powerful beings in the Dominion. Ambassadors from conquered worlds, warlords who had bent the knee, merchant princes whose wealth could buy star systems. And at the head of the table, alone on a raised dais, sat Valisra. No one sat beside her. No one sat within 10 meters of her. The first 5 chairs on either side of the throne, the quarantine seats, as the courtiers whispered, remained permanently empty. It was not a rule that was written down. It was a rule that was felt. To sit beside the Empress was to invite death. Not from her. She had never harmed a subject without cause, but from the sheer weight of her presence. The energy that radiated from her crystalline form was lethal to most organic life. A Xylosian noble could withstand it for perhaps an hour before their nervous system began to fray. A softer species, like the gelatinous aquilins, would dissolve in minutes. The RYZK, with their 3 hearts and thick hides, could last an afternoon, but they would spend the next week in a medical pod. So the seats remained empty. The Empress dined alone, watching her people feast, a silent reminder of the cost of her power. She had accepted this long ago. She had been born to it. Her mother had sat alone. Her grandmother had sat alone. For 3,000 years, the Empress of Thorns had sat alone, and the galaxy had assumed it was the natural order of things. Until the human arrived. Part 2. The Treaty. The human's name was Jian, and he was an engineer. He was also, by his own admission, profoundly unqualified for diplomacy. He had been sent to the Xylosian Dominion as part of a technical exchange program, a gesture of goodwill following the tentative peace treaty between the Dominion and the fledgling human confederacy. The humans had something the Xylosians wanted: expertise in gravitational field manipulation. The Xylosians had something the humans wanted: access to stable wormhole routes. Jian was supposed to spend 6 months on the capital world, teaching Xylosian engineers how to maintain the new gravity generators they'd purchased. He was supposed to stay in the technical sector, far from the political intrigue of the Crystal Palace. But the universe, as Jian often said, had a terrible sense of humor. His first week on the planet, a transport strike stranded him in the diplomatic quarter. His second week, a miscommunication resulted in his credentials listing him as a technical attaché, which apparently granted him access to state functions. His third week, an invitation arrived for the Grand Feast of Alignment, the most important social event of the Xylosian calendar. Jian almost declined. He had no interest in politics, no suitable clothes, and a profound discomfort with formal situations. But his Xylosian liaison, a nervous bureaucrat named Threx, was insistent. "You must attend," Threx said, his crystalline form flickering with anxiety. It would be an insult to decline. The humans are new here. We must show respect. So Jian borrowed a formal tunic that didn't quite fit, spent an hour learning which fork to use for dishes he couldn't eat, and walked into the great hall of 1,000 stars feeling like a fraud. The hall was overwhelming. The light from 1,000 crystalline beings refracted off every surface, creating a kaleidoscope of color. The noise was immense, a symphony of clinking utensils, overlapping conversations, and the strange harmonic hum of Xylosian speech. Jian stood in the doorway, overwhelmed, searching for his assigned seat. The seating chart was a holographic display near the entrance. Jian found his name, Jian Li, Human Confederacy, Technical Attaché, and followed the glowing line to his table. His heart sank. His seat was at the head table. The head table. The one on the raised dais. Specifically, his seat was directly to the left of the Empress of Thorns. Part 3. The Silence. The walk to the dais was the longest journey of Jian's life. Every eye in the hall followed him. The whispers started immediately, a susurrus of shock that rippled through the crowd like wind through wheat. He heard fragments of translation through his implant. Is he going? Doesn't he know? Someone should stop him. Look, he's still walking. Poor creature. Someone fetch a medic. Jian kept walking. He was an engineer. He solved problems. Right now, the problem was reaching his assigned seat, and he intended to solve it. The empty chairs loomed before him. 5 on each side, pristine and untouched, as if they'd never been sat in. The crystal of the dais was darker here, polished to a mirror shine. The air felt different, thicker, charged with static. Jian reached his chair. He looked at it. He looked at the Empress. She was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. Her form was humanoid but wrong. Too tall, too angular, composed of interlocking crystal facets that pulsed with soft inner light. Her face was a mask of perfect symmetry, with eyes like twin stars. She wore a gown of woven light that shifted colors as she breathed, if she breathed. Jian realized he had no idea if she breathed. She was watching him. Her expression was unreadable, but he felt the weight of her attention like a physical pressure. Jian did the only thing that made sense. He bowed a short, awkward bow, the kind you give when you're not sure of the protocol, and sat down. The hall went absolutely silent. For 3,000 years, no one had sat in those chairs. For 3,000 years, the Empress had dined alone. And now a pink, soft, ridiculous human in an ill-fitting tunic had just plopped down beside her like he was grabbing a seat at a spaceport cafeteria. Jian felt the energy in the air. It was like sitting next to a reactor core. The static made his hair stand on end. A low hum vibrated in his bones. His skin tingled with a strange, not unpleasant warmth. He looked at the table. There was food, elaborate dishes that steamed and shimmered, clearly designed for the Xylosian palate. There was also, he noticed with relief, a glass of water. He took a sip. The Empress spoke. Her voice was not sound. It was vibration, resonance, a frequency that bypassed his ears and sang directly in his bones. His implant struggled to translate. You are sitting beside me. Jian looked up. Yes, Your Majesty.
It's where they assigned me.
Should I move? A long pause. The entire hall was holding its breath. No, the Empress said. You should not move. Another pause. Why are you not dead? Jian blinked. I'm sorry. The energy. My radiance. It is lethal to most organic life within minutes. You've been sitting here for nearly a full minute. You should be experiencing neural degradation. Yet you are drinking water. Jian looked at his glass. He looked at his hands.
He felt fine.
Better than fine, actually. The warmth was pleasant, like sitting in the sun. I feel okay, he said. A bit tingly. Is it supposed to be worse? The Empress leaned closer. The movement was fluid, inhuman, her form shifting like liquid light. She studied him with those star-bright eyes. Remarkable, she murmured. What are you? An engineer, Jian said. From Earth. I'm here for the Gravity Generator Project. I know what your title is. I asked what you are. Jian considered the question. It was the kind of philosophical inquiry he was deeply unqualified to answer. I'm human, he said finally. We're adaptable. And we run hot. Our internal temperature is higher than most species. Maybe that helps? Or maybe your energy is a different frequency than what affects us. I need to run some tests. The Empress made a sound. It took Jian a moment to realize it was laughter, a soft, crystalline chime that seemed to surprise even her. Tests, she repeated. You wish to run tests on why my lethal radiance fails to kill you. Well, yeah, it's interesting. From an engineering perspective. From the hall below, 1,000 jaws dropped. Our YZK warlord choked on his drink. An Aquiline ambassador began to liquefy from sheer stress. The Empress of Thorns, for the first time in 3,000 years, was not sitting alone. Part 4. The Aftermath. The feast continued, though no one remembered what they ate. Jian ate nothing. The food was inedible to humans, but he drank several glasses of water and made polite conversation. He asked the Empress about the architecture of the hall. He asked about the history of the Dominion. He asked about her opinion on the new gravity generators. She answered. She asked questions of her own. What was Earth like? What did humans eat? Why did they keep pets? The conversation was stilted at first, then easier, then almost natural. When the feast ended, Jian bowed again and returned to his quarters, oblivious to the chaos he had caused. The next morning, his door chimed before dawn. Threx burst in, his crystalline form flickering so rapidly he looked like a strobe light. You sat beside her. I know. It was on the chart. You lived. I know. I feel fine. You talked to her. For hours. We had a conversation, yes. She's very intelligent. A bit lonely, I think. Threx made a sound like a kettle whistling. Lonely? She is the Empress of Thorns. She has ruled for 800 years. She has conquered 1,000 worlds. She is not lonely. Jian shrugged. Everyone gets lonely. Even empresses. The next week, another invitation arrived. This time, it was for a private audience in the Imperial Garden. Jian went. The garden was a marvel of bioengineering, a contained ecosystem of plants from 100 conquered worlds. The Empress waited for him beside a fountain of liquid light. You came, she said. You invited me.
Yes.
I did. She was quiet for a moment. Do you know how long it has been since someone sat beside me? Threx mentioned something about 3,000 years. Your mother and grandmother also sat alone. The first Empress, my great-great-grandmother, 17 generations removed, discovered the nature of our power. The energy that sustains us is lethal to others. She accepted the isolation as the price of rule. We all have. For 3 millennia, the Empress of Thorns has dined alone. Jian nodded slowly. That sounds incredibly sad. It is our duty. Duty doesn't have to be sad. Maybe there's another way. What other way? I cannot change what I am. No, Jian agreed. But maybe you don't have to. Maybe the problem isn't you. Maybe it's the chairs. She looked at him, confused. The chairs beside you. They're too close. The energy is too concentrated. But what if someone sat further away? What if the table was arranged differently? What if there was shielding? What if? You are thinking like an engineer. I am an engineer. That's literally why I'm here. The Empress was silent for a long moment. Then, softly, no one has ever thought like that before. No one has ever tried to solve the problem. They just accepted it. Accepting a problem you can't solve is wisdom, Jian said. Accepting a problem you can solve is laziness. Part 5. The Solution. For the next 3 months, Jian worked on a project that had nothing to do with gravity generators. He studied the Empress's energy output. He measured frequencies, intensities, dispersion patterns. He consulted with Xylosian physicists and human biologists. He ran simulations and built prototypes. The solution, when it came, was elegantly simple. The Empress's energy was dangerous at close range, but it dissipated rapidly with distance. The lethal zone was approximately 3 meters. Beyond that, the effects were mild. The warmth Jian had felt, the tingling, nothing more. The problem wasn't the Empress. The problem was the chairs. The quarantine seats were too close. They were placed at the standard Xylosian distance for dining companions, about 1 meter. But Xylosians weren't the ones sitting there. Other species were. And other species couldn't handle the proximity. Jian's proposal: move the chairs. Not far. Just 3.5 meters back. Far enough for safety, close enough for conversation. Install discrete energy diffusers in the table surface. Provide optional personal shielding for sensitive species. Turn the killing zone into a comfort zone. The court was horrified. The idea was sacrilege. The chairs had been in the same position for 3,000 years. The quarantine seats were tradition. The Empress's isolation was sacred. The Empress overruled them all. Tradition, she said, is just peer pressure from dead people. My ancestors accepted loneliness because they saw no alternative. A human engineer showed me an alternative. I choose to be less lonely. The renovations took 2 weeks. Part 6. The Feast. The next grand feast of alignment was the most anticipated event in a century. Every seat at the head table was filled. Ambassadors who had spent their careers avoiding the dais now jostled for position. The RYZK warlord sat 3 seats down and declared the warmth invigorating. The Aquilan ambassador, safely shielded, managed to retain his solid form for the entire evening. And beside the Empress, in the seat of honor, sat Jian Li. He wore a better tunic this time. The Empress had insisted on having one tailored for him. He ate a small plate of human food that the kitchen had prepared specially. He drank water because he still didn't trust the local beverages. The Empress did not eat. She never would. But she talked. She laughed that crystalline laugh. She leaned toward Jian as he told stories about his childhood on Earth, about the first ship he'd built, about the time a gravity generator had exploded and sent him through 3 walls. The hall buzzed with conversation, but it was different now. Lighter. Warmer. The shadow that had hung over the dais for 3,000 years had lifted. Near the end of the feast, the Empress leaned close to Jian, close enough that her energy made his skin prickle. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For sitting down. For not being afraid. For seeing a problem and solving it instead of accepting it." Jian shrugged. "I'm an engineer. That's what we do."
No.
Her star-bright eyes held his. "That's who you are. There's a difference." Epilogue. The seat beside her. Jian's assignment to the Xylosian Dominion was extended indefinitely. There was always more work to do. More systems to optimize. More problems to solve. The gravity generators were running perfectly, but now there were energy diffusers to maintain, shielding technology to improve, and 1,000 other projects that had sprung from the simple act of sitting down. He never moved to the diplomatic quarters. He kept his small engineer's cabin, with its cluttered workbench and its view of the crystal spires. The Empress visited sometimes, in her more solid form, and they would talk for hours about nothing and everything. At every feast, he sat beside her. It was no longer remarkable. It was simply where he belonged. Other humans came to the Dominion, traders, diplomats, more engineers. They sat at the head table too, scattered among the other species, adding their warmth to the gathering. The quarantine seats were a historical footnote, a curiosity that young Xylosians studied in school. And the Empress of Thorns, who had ruled alone for 800 years, who had inherited 3,000 years of isolation, never dined alone again. She had conquered 1,000 worlds, but the conquest that mattered most was the small one, the conquest of a single seat at a single table, claimed by a human engineer who didn't know any better. Or maybe he did know better. Maybe he knew exactly what he was doing when he sat down beside her. Jian never said. He just smiled, drank his water, and enjoyed the warmth.
The end.